The second part of the lecture series dealing with working in teams highlights nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is a fascinating area, and much of the content I'm sharing with you today not only comes out of the textbook, but also is information that I learned under the direction of Dr. Peter Anderson, who is a well-known expert in the area of nonverbal communication. He is a professor at San Diego State University, which is where I got my master's degree, and he was just a wealth of information in this area. So I'm sharing with you also some of the content that I learned in Dr. Anderson's course. And so the first area, what I'm going to do is share with you some different areas of nonverbal communication, share with you the technical term, and then give you some examples. So the first area in nonverbal communication that people study is the study of body movement, which is known as kinesics. Some of you may have heard that term before, but it deals with body movement. And what's important with nonverbal communication is that you realize that even though you may not be intending to send out a message, your body language does send out a message. So, for example, leaning forward sends out what message? Well, I teach my students that leaning forward sends out the message that you are interested, you are attentive. So I always tell my students in an interview to lean slightly forward. Yes, don't fall off your chair, but leaning slightly forward shows your interest and your eagerness. Crossing your arms sends out what message? Well, as pictured in the photo here on the left side, crossing your arms tends to send out the message that you are closed to what someone is saying. What's funny about this is I often cross my arms because I tend to always be cold, very chilly, poor circulation, I guess you could say. But I cross my arms just to warm my hands up. And since I've studied in this area of nonverbal communication, I've become aware of what message that sends out, that is either authority or closed to what someone is saying. And I wouldn't say it means that at all, or that's not what I'm feeling, and so I will catch myself many times and uncross my arms because I don't want to be perceived of as closed off to what someone is saying. And it's not that I am, it's just that it can appear that way. So it's very important you become aware of your body language and what message you are sending out. Next, we're going to look at the study of appearance or artifacts. And this is a really fascinating area. It's also known as objectics. Appearance is important in making a good first impression. You're going to hear me state this throughout the semester. Light travels faster than sound, so you are seen before you are heard, and people are forming opinions about you. Now, we all know that what's on the inside is more important than what's on the outside. However, it's my job to get you off on the right foot in an interview or in a presentation that you're giving. And so dressing formally is important. So just keep in mind that when we get to the point we're giving presentations or you're going through your mock interviews, that you dress professionally. But yes, what you say and do in an interview can certainly change a person's mind about you no matter what you are wearing, but it's harder to change someone's impression of you once they already have an impression. And typically that's based on appearance starting out. So clothing, jewelry, your automobile, your grooming, all of these things tell a lot about your age, your values, your status, and so forth. So really fascinating area. Study of vocal qualities. This is technically known as paralanguage. Now, I know when I sat in Dr. Peterson's class, I certainly had an issue with this because I said, wait a minute, this is verbal. This is not nonverbal. This is dealing with the voice. And I talked to him after class ended back when I was a graduate student, and he said, well, Kim, you're not alone. You're not the only person who has questioned whether or not this should be an area of nonverbal communication. but most experts agree that it is. And so for the sake of argument, we will go along with that because Dr. Peter Anderson did explain to me the meaning behind this, and he says it's because vocal qualities or paralanguage deals with volume, pitch, tone, and rate. It's in a sense the way in which a word is spoken is what gives it meaning. So saying, I had a good day, raising your eyebrows and smiling versus, ugh, I had a great day, and shaking your head. Just the way in which that word was spoken and the tone changed the meaning of the word. So paralanguage is considered an area of nonverbal communication. Study of time, also known as chronemics. So how do cultures use time differently in business settings? Well, you might even think of negotiations. I know in Asia, many people from Asia want to get to know you better before they enter into any business negotiations with you. They want to know what type of person you are. They want to establish some trust. Whereas in the North America, we tend to rush negotiations. We want to get down to work, get the business taken care of, and then relax. So it's really important, especially if you're studying international business or you're planning on moving abroad or taking part in business relations abroad, that you know that many times it's important for a culture to get to know you before entering into those business negotiations with you. So it's probably best not to rush those negotiations in those other cultures. How could your use of time reflect your status in an organization? Well, not that it's necessarily right, but typically we see people in higher status positions have a little more flexibility with their time because they've proven themselves. They've probably proven that they're hard workers, and it's acceptable for them to come in late because they probably had a good reason that they're late. They may have been doing business. They may take a late lunch. Well, they may have been playing golf over lunch, doing business over the golf course. We even have a course here at Point Loma called Business Golf, just to stress the importance of the fact that many negotiations take place on the golf course. So sometimes things, and not that it's right, but sometimes we might view status, higher status, as having a little more flexibility with time. And I see a difference in use of time just having lived in different places in the nation, in the Midwest versus the West Coast. In the Midwest, things tend to be very timely. On the West Coast, just a little more laid back in certain work contexts. I know my husband, it was typically fine for him to go into work an hour late as long as he got his work done. In the Midwest, he was expected to be right on time. So I think it's different throughout not only the world, but even within our own nation. Study of touch, also known as haptics. Now, if you think about it, we touch people very rarely in a work setting. However, greetings are one time that we do often touch in a work setting. And of course, our traditional greeting in America is the handshake. And I encourage you to think about your handshake. But before I get into that, I want to talk about what are some different greetings. Well, depending on the culture and where you're traveling, you might receive a kiss on the cheek. You might get a hug. In Asia, there's probably no touching. There's a bow. Okay, so it's very important if you're traveling to other cultures that you are aware if touch is involved in their greeting so that you are prepared for that and not caught off guard. So once again, I ask you to think about your handshake. I know because I teach interviewing skills in my course, I stress to my students to have a firm handshake. It is not a wrestling competition. You are not trying to see who has the strongest handshake. Okay, you just want a firm handshake. Why? Well, think about it. What does a firm handshake send out? It sends out a message that you are confident versus a weak handshake that you are not as confident, not as sure of yourself. The interesting part is you could be very confident and very sure of yourself and have a weak handshake. But that is the message that action sends out. If you have a weak handshake, that you're not as confident. And once again, you can change someone's mind by what you say and do, but to get off on the right foot, the firm handshake is important as part of that first impression. Study of space and territory, probably one of my favorite areas to talk about with regard to nonverbal communication. It's also known as proxemics. Well, proxemics, what's fascinating about this area is, and really with all nonverbal rules, we're guided by rules that are not taught. We're not formally taught how to do many of these things. We learn them through experience. For instance, when you get in an elevator, where do you stand? Well, you get in the elevator and typically you'll go as far apart from the other person in the elevator as possible, if there's anyone else in there. You'll probably go to the back corner of the elevator, space yourself out from the other people in the elevator. They'll even move over to give you more room between themselves and yourself. So you typically provide as much space as possible between you and the other people. Where do your eyes go? They typically go to the door or to the numbers. You're looking at what floor you're on. Is there a lot of talk? No, hardly any talk. Right? It's very rare. I can remember getting in an elevator with a friend of mine in graduate school, and we were both TAs. We both taught a speech class, and she was telling me a story about a student, and it was just, she was amazed at the work this student had done and was just raving on and on, but it was also kind of a funny story, so she's giggling. And we approach this elevator that is just packed full of people. And as I approach and she's in the middle of her story, I wave my hand at them and I say, "Go ahead, we'll get the next elevator." Well, as we got up to the elevator and the door was still open, my friend says, "Oh no, we can squeeze in." And I thought, oh goodness, already, that's one rule violated. You never force yourself into an elevator that is packed. So we get into the elevator and my friend violates rule number 2 in an elevator. The doors go closed. She turns to me and of course, I got in, turned and faced the door along with everybody else. She gets in and faces me and everybody in the elevator and continues on with her story. So not only has she broken a rule by pushing into a crowded elevator, the doors go closed, she faces everybody, which you do not do, and she starts talking when the doors close, as if no one else is there but the two of us. And so I just will never forget it. Everyone started giggling because it was just such an uncomfortable situation that what else could we do? I was even giggling because it was so uncomfortable. And my wonderful friend just started laughing because she thought her story was so funny, which it was funny too, but I couldn't even concentrate on it so much because of how many nonverbal rules she was breaking. So just one example of that. And then another one, I don't know if any of you have seen all those reruns of Seinfeld and when Elaine dates the close talker. And the whole the point of the show is, everyone is so uncomfortable because this person she's dating always violates everybody's personal bubble. If you put your arms out in front of you and make a little bubble, make a circle with your hands, that's your personal bubble. If people get within that, it's very uncomfortable unless it's someone you know well. Well, her date always violated that, and people were talking about how close he gets when he talks, and it was just another example of those nonverbal rules that we are not taught but we learn through experience, and when they're violated it is very uncomfortable. So proxemics is broken into 4 zones: the intimate zone, the personal zone, the social zone, and the public zone. The intimate zone is touching to 18 inches. Okay, you don't get this close with many people in a business setting unless you're shaking their hand. So touching to 18 inches. Personal zone, 18 inches to 3 feet. 18 inches to 3 feet. So you think about it, this is the zone where most of our conversations take place, like on a day-to-day basis. 18 inches to 3 feet. Social zone, 3 feet to 12 feet. 3 feet to 12 feet. And this is where consultations commonly take place. You're going to meet with your advisor. You go into his or her office and you're seated across from them. They're at their desk and you're across the room or across the desk. This is the social zone. Okay, 3 feet to 12 feet. The public zone is 12 feet and beyond. Many times the public zone is where you would then be in a seminar format or a lecture format where you're up presenting and you have people. Yes, the front row might be within 12 feet, but the rest of the audience would be beyond 12 feet. So 3 feet to 12 feet. All right, next we're going to look at the study of eye contact, which is also known as oculesics. So, once again, we see some differences when we look at different cultures. So I ask you, do we value eye contact in North America? Right now you should probably be nodding your head yes, because for the most part we value eye contact. I know being an instructor of communication, I'm always stressing the importance of making eye contact. It helps with credibility. It helps with you just connecting with your audience. You look knowledgeable, that you know what you're talking about. You look confident. So making eye contact we really value for the most part in North America. All right, but what you need to be careful of is other cultures don't always value eye contact. As a matter of fact, in certain cultures, looking someone in the eye can be perceived of as rude, as if you're questioning what they're saying. So I always say, if you're planning on traveling abroad, studying abroad, doing business abroad, study the nonverbal rules of that culture before you travel. Okay, because you want to avoid being ethnocentric and just saying, well, our way is the best, my way is the best. Okay, and just strive to be aware and culturally sensitive, all right, of the nonverbal norms of other cultures. Okay, and now what we will do is we will move on to part 3, which deals with listening skills. Thank you.